So if I can, I'd like to just jump out, talk a little bit about who our panelists are, which I'm really delighted to be here today. And I hope we're going to really engage in really getting a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities in provisioning for a multi-screen world. So immediately to my right, Sam Blackman, Chairman and CEO of Elemental. I am so glad you're here. Sam, tell us something about you that no one in the audience knows and that's not officially in your biography.
Something that no one in the audience knows. I have several colleagues here, so I'm going to have to dig deep. Let's see. My first birthday present was a little golden retriever puppy. His name was Sport, and I sat on him for the first year of my life.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, we're going to have some Sport here because John Gildred, the CTO of SyncTV, is with us. And John, tell us a little bit of something we don't know about you.
I like your style. This is interesting. Let's see. I lived about 3 years of my high school life in Argentina.
All right. and how is your Spanish today?
¿Está bien?
Poquito más.
Yeah, it's un poco peor.
Yeah, okay. All right. Tom Lattie, Vice President, Product Management, Production, Playout, and Multiscreen. I'm sure there's other words you wanted to put in your title, but you ran out of room on the business card for Harmonic. Tell us something about yourself.
I wanted a shorter title.
Thank you. And Julien, I'm struggling with your last name. Cygnus?
Yeah.
Is that good enough?
It's good.
I would speak with a French accent, but you would really hate me. You are president, CEO, and really one of the founders of Envivio, which is taking the world by storm. You've really raised the profile for your company dramatically in the last couple of years. It's very impressive. Tell us something we don't know about you, Julien.
I'm French. I like good food. What about that?
So I'm hoping that in this panel we're going to be understanding the unique challenges and opportunities in cloud-based video service delivery. We're going to understand what are some of the upcoming expectations that these new services and these technologies deliver. And really, so we've got a competitive technology world. How is that affecting us? So let's get started. And guys, this panel is going to be great, fantastic, and better if you would just argue with yourselves because, again, you are the brains on this panel, not me. So what do you believe are the core technical elements of an IP-based multi-screen service management backend? Anyone?
Go ahead.
Everybody wants
All right,
to
well, I'll make a comment because SyncTV has to put all the pieces together, and we work with, I think, everyone here to build those infrastructures, and we have a platform that we claim is turnkey, and we feel that that's an essential component to make it turnkey. There are a lot of pieces. There's the CMS, there's the DRM, there's the apps on all the platforms, there's the encoders, and if they're live, that's different than if they're VOD encoders. There's the distribution. There are lots of security elements in between all of them, and then when you integrate all those pieces, then you have a billing system, subscription management, or pay-per-view. You've got a lot of pieces to put together. There's generally 5 or 6 vendors you're going to go to if you are going to use third parties to build this thing and not build it yourself. At SyncTV, our philosophy has been you go to one company that can provide all of it. And we work with live encoding companies, such as those on this panel, and then we work with third-party CDNs. But other than that, SyncTV has the whole solution under one roof. So I would say there are a lot of pieces, and it's still very complicated, and we're trying to solve that.
Absolutely. Julien, do you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that it's not different from any traditional TV at a high level. You need all the elements at SyncTV are listed. I think the biggest challenge comes from the multi-screen aspect because television used to be a device that was very well defined. ATSC defined the resolution, the frame rate, etc., that the TV was consuming. Now the device manufacturers are the new TV manufacturers, iPads, iPhones, etc., and that drives the spec. And so the protocols, the resolutions, the bit rates, the network it travels to are all exploding, and as a result, in particular, the part we focus on, all the transcoding and content adaptation, has become increasingly more complex. And so I think one of the key trends and the key complexity in delivering multi-screen TV versus TV at high level, same thing, in terms of video processing and adaptation, much more complex because there's so many profiles and resolution screens, bit rates, etc. So at Envivio, not surprisingly, we try to solve that problem.
It's complex, Tom. How complex is it?
Well, I don't want to disagree, but not to simplify what we do, I think it is complex. It's getting simpler, and I really think, or we think the multiple screens is more evolutionary. I still believe that when you look at a multi-screen offering, the real challenge is it really still handles the back end, content windows. You know, explaining to my 7-year-old why Bolt is no longer on Netflix. You know, they don't understand content windows and expiration of content, when to pull that content off. You know, many of us here on the panel from a video processing perspective have the skill sets, I think, to solve the video quality, the bit rate, the resolution, the adaptation. I think what SyncTV does is still part of the significant challenge, which is I have a homogeneous offering, I'm an operator, and I can have my content on any screen. Companies like Harmonic can solve that, and we think we can solve it well. I think there's still a very complex challenge, though, which is I can have that content on my TV screen, but not on my iPad this week because the content window has changed. Or I can have these channels on a start-over infrastructure, but not these because the content windows don't allow. I think the business backend is still very complex as we work very hard to solve the delivery and the transformation of this content for any screen. I think the content world and legal world to catch up with the technology is still probably the biggest challenge.
I heard a recent stat, I don't know how accurate it is, that a few years ago ABC was distributing its content to all the different platforms in all the different languages on a worldwide basis, and that for any television show or promotion, almost 100,000 different versions of that content had to go out against different platforms, codecs, you know, different languages, different time frames. It's really something that's gotten so complex, but your companies are helping to manage that whole process. Sam, tell us a little bit about Elemental and what it does in this space.
Sure. I think the point that Tom and Julien have made was an excellent one, which is that really everything is converging. I just talked to a major service provider this morning. They said today they have 5 separate platforms for delivering video to mobile, to IPTV set-top boxes, to flash-based player on a PC. 5 separate platforms they have to manage and keep track of. With IP-based delivery, Elemental, for example, has one product, Elemental Server, for delivering VOD-based content and creating VOD-based content, and then a separate product, Elemental Live, for live linear streaming. With those 2 products, you can basically deliver any kind of service to any kind of connected IP-based video device. So while there's complexity in the core technology, the actual ability to deliver video to multi-screen devices is much, much, much easier with IP than it is over legacy networks. And I think you're going to see all the legacy networks, whether it's satellite, whether it's cable, whether it's over-the-air or IPTV, converging to IP over the next couple years. And that's going to be something that companies like Elemental and Harmonic and Envivio work very hard to make simple for service providers and programmers.
Tom.
Well, I agree on the one hand, although it will be interesting on the previous panel here in the ITV discussion. You know, the comment thrown out that a MPEG-2 standard definition cable box will have a life of 10 to 15 years moving forward. So I think there is an added level of complexity, which is how does a Comcast unify their infrastructure, not just to deliver to an iPad and a set-top box of next generation, but how do they continue to service with the best video quality and unified infrastructure that DCT 2000 that we all know and dread in the industry, because it will be there. So, you know, so how do I do a high-quality MPEG-2, you know, statistical multiplex delivery of that video because somebody's watching that, maybe in the same room as someone watching it on an iPad. And what we've seen from the operator space is they look to grow profits and reduce complexity of the networks is how do they collapse those infrastructures. And I think that is a challenge that we continue to focus on within the space.
Julien, you want to jump in?
No, absolutely. I mean, the convergence. I think that in the first years where iPad and iPhones appear, people understand, people want to watch TV on this. Our vision has always been that convergence. TV has just become one of the screens. I think it's very hard for the traditional broadcast infrastructure, either vendors or players, to realize that TV is just iPad is just another TV. So we've taken that approach at Envivio in our design and just say, well, we address content for the statistical multiplexed MPEG-2 set-top box as well as the new iPads, and it's changing every day. Every day there's a new device. So like you said, the 100,000 formats, I'm not surprised. And like my colleagues here said, it's true. There are technologies that are coming out from our company and our competitors that enable the operator to focus on what they know, which is running their service. And we kind of abstract that extreme complexity of all these explosion of formats. But let's not downplay what we do. We solve that problem.
Well, let's take a look at how you solve that problem. I believe we have some video that's ready, and if Ken Pyle can help run the video from Envivio, we'll take a look at that rate shaping, and you can take us through that process. While we're doing that, while we're loading up the video, a question that comes to my mind is second screen. Are we really in a second screen world? What's your perspective? Or are you just any screen world?
Well, I'll make a comment on that. I think you can't really classify the screens because what we're seeing is that you're getting an app infrastructure now on standard televisions. You have an app infrastructure on mobile devices. Now you're getting what used to be only game infrastructure is now becoming more of a general app infrastructure on consoles, on game consoles. So this app method of deploying new services is becoming more ubiquitous and becoming more of a standard method of delivering services to lots of different devices. And I don't think the consumers care whether or not it's connected to a coax or whether or not it sits on this table or next to your bed. They have certain devices that they find interesting. All these devices now have app platforms. You have to look at what devices are popular and how to deliver to them. So SyncTV has always taken the perspective of if this device platform is getting popular, we make an app for it and we build it into the infrastructure so that anyone running on our platform can get to it. And it doesn't matter what the DRM is, it doesn't matter what the format is that it needs, it doesn't matter any of that stuff. One thing that it always does have is IP delivery for video and some type of app platform in order to present your service. And that's enough.
Well, let me ask. I mean, Time Warner Cable just came out and they announced that on the Android platform they don't have open streaming. Is that DOA? Are they dead? Android not open streaming for their second screen in the home.
Are you asking if Android is dead or if the service is
Time
dead?
Warner Cable offering a non-streaming service?
I would say that no. I mean, they can always change their mind or renegotiate the terms to be able to do whatever they need to do. So that's pretty challenging for live to be able to get terms that makes it available outside their network. But technically, to get on Android or to get on any of these other platforms that have apps, there's no barrier to make that happen. It's all a business relationship or business licensing issue at this point.
Sam, you want to jump in?
I would jump in and just say that the iPad, from our perspective, has been absolutely a game changer for the space overall. There have been mobile video, there's been flash-based video on your PC for 10 years. And really, the whole market for multi-screen video processing didn't take off until the iPad hit. We actually did some tracking where we looked at iPad shipments quarter by quarter relative to Elemental's video processing systems, both Elemental Server and Elemental Live. And in terms of the market growth, our video processing systems tracked exactly with iPad growth rates. So I think the iPad has fundamentally changed the equation for most service providers. And right now, this is the only second screen that matters from a pay TV service provider perspective.
Well, I know the panel here has some terrific out of this country experience, not out of this world. But Julien, I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience in Orange and what you're experiencing here.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So what's interesting is that I would agree with Sam that the iPad has been tremendous. But mobile TV has existed for a long time, and we've been a pioneer in that space. And Orange has been one of the pioneers out in Europe. What's interesting is that outside of the US, it's actually much easier to get premium content on mobile networks. Like it was said before, it's all a matter of negotiations. What we know is that the consumers want their content anywhere, and that's not just in their home. So I think I see all the initiatives from Time Warner and all the cable operators here as a first step to where Orange is already, which is you have your content wherever you are. If you are in the Orange network, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, hotspots, etc. You can get your content on your iPad, but also on your laptop and on your home PC and on your iPhone. So I think that there is a tremendous issue with rights, not in the sense that it's not technically possible. It's just that the rights owner wants more money, and and who is going to pay for it? But that issue will solve itself. I think the reality is that the consumer, we are past the notion of is mobile TV going to be successful. In a way, mobile TV is dead by itself. But what's now is converged TV anywhere, as people want their content that they pay for on any platform, any network, etc. So I see that as an evolution. I see that US in a way is trailing in terms of the maturity of the mobile networks and mobile TV, but it's going to get there.
Tom, you have something you want to add?
Well, I think we mix a lot of metaphors. You could argue that what we now call mobile TV is simply internet TV. The devices that are mobile happen to be internet-connected devices. And I think this commonality of whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone. These are essentially PCs we carry around, and they're internet devices, not a traditional broadcast or mobile-type infrastructure. I'd also like to make the point that we talk about multi-screen. If you look at it from one side, you could argue we've always been multi-screen. Since the advent of high-definition content in mass scale, we've effectively had a two-screen environment in many homes. Service providers have to have separate infrastructures historically to deliver HD content and SD content to those homes, sometimes over different codecs, different wrappers to different devices, different formatting. Whether we now have an 11-inch screen, an 8-inch screen, and a 3.5-inch screen, this is effectively the same content being just resolution and codec different, but it's in many ways simply an evolution of what we already started at the beginning of the 2000 in real volume.
So I think Beyonce is coming out with a new song about living in a rate-shaping world or something to that effect. And I'm just kind of curious. We have Tom Sauer from AT&T sitting with us this morning. What are 3 must-haves that you would like to tell AT&T that they need to take into consideration for this entire world of provisioning and being able to offer this video content from your level of expertise? Sam, do you want to take that first?
Sure. Well, that's a good question, and I wouldn't presume to give advice to AT&T. They've done a pretty good job building a company there over the past 110 years or whatever the number is. But I do think the major service providers really need to focus on several areas. First, I think it's going to be absolutely critical to have that multi-screen device available everywhere, that multi-screen experience available everywhere. One of the big reasons I think Netflix and Hulu and some of those companies are doing so well is because you don't have to think about what device supports Netflix. Any device you buy, whether it's an Xbox, whether it's a phone, whether it's a tablet, you're going to be able to watch Netflix content on there. And I think that's a kind of ease of use benefit that some of the pure OTT services have over the established service providers. So that's one thing. Second, I think moving away from a hardware-centric view of the world in terms of how you build your infrastructure to one that's all software and all IP-based is going to be critical. The standards are changing so fast. Tom mentioned that this is an evolution. I would really say that this transition from legacy networks to converged IP networks is a disruptive change, disruptive transformation in the video industry, and that hardware used to work in legacy because it moved really slowly, but today you got to be software-based because things change so fast. So that's the second piece. And third, fix the set-top box UIs. Do whatever it takes to make the experience on your big screen TV in the living room as good as what you have on your iPad and your iPhone.
Okay, John from SyncTV, give us some advice.
What advice do I have for AT&T? more than ever, build out your network. You know, have more towers, more speed, faster, faster.
Yeah, I want
you
UVerse at my home. Come on, bring it to Palos Verdes.
I mean, that would be the big one. I think that the TV set-tops are going to transform on their own, but the network, the wireless network really needs to move larger, faster to be competitive and to be interesting, and it'll enable so many other markets to happen.
Yeah, I can second that. I think that when you think about cable versus AT&T, a lot of people have said, well, AT&T can't compete, but AT&T has an asset that none of the cable guys have, which is their wireless network. And at the moment, it's all sucked up by downloading apps on iPhones. And if they want to do video, they need to go to 4G and have a true broadband wireless networks, and then they can differentiate, because then they can really fulfill the promise of content anywhere. Not just in the home. Granted, the content rights need to be negotiated. So I think that's to me, that's a bigger step they need to take. And I would agree with the other points Sam made, and software is key because the requirements are changing all the time. So.
What has Harmonic got to say about this?
Well, I would say three things. Well, first, I think it's interesting with AT&T that, you know, while from a UVerse platform they may be a bit behind the curve, by the sole supplier of the iPhone in the U.S. and their network, they've actually enabled a lot of this growth almost by second hand, right? DirecTV's Sunday Ticket success on the iPhone and iPad is driven largely by AT&T's network and their engagement with Apple. So, I mean, well, they haven't necessarily monetized directly on their pay TV platform as an overall company. I think they've benefited from this trend to date. I think we have to be careful, you know, we are technology companies. I think we have to be careful about not driving this notion that it has to be a hardware or software solution to be the right answer. I think that if there's one thing that you know Harmonic has learned as a pioneer in digital video, launching some of the first platforms in the world, that there never is the exact right answer every time. The use case is different, the technology trends, and often, you know, you have to be careful about painting yourself into this fallacy that it has to be a particular technology to solve all problems. Our approach has been that depending on whether it's a software solution or an ASIC-based solution or what have you, you need multiple tools in your toolkit to solve the problem for each operator. And we think that, you know, with that we've been relatively responsive. Even in the legacy broadcast space, you see us innovating in video compression on an 18 to 24 month cycle, which is I think relatively rapid. And you can augment that with software and an overall solution to really not tie yourself down to any particular religion when it comes to solving not only a technical but also a business problem that our customers face.
Let me ask a question that's come out of some of the discussion from the Media Innovation Summit. There's almost a general consensus that today network service providers are overpriced and under-provisioned. Agree? Not agree?
Completely agree. I think, again, coming from Europe, just to give a perspective, the ARPU, so the average revenue per user on Orange is $50 US. That's for telephony plus live TV, video on demand. And now for $60, you also have your basic coverage for cell phone. The equivalent package on Comcast today is over $150, so 3x that. With that network, if you're in the city, you've got 14 megabit per second DSL, so very decent footprint. So I think that yes, there is a huge discrepancy, and part of the overcost, by the way, is one is obviously the profit those companies make, but the other is the content rights price in the U.S. versus international is just tremendous different, and so I think that needs to be changing because again, you know, having a $40 where you've got your fast DSL, your telephone, by the way, free in like 50 countries, unlimited, plus your live and on-demand TV makes a huge difference in adoption.
Sure. What does Harmonic say about this?
Well, I think as a consumer, obviously, we want lower price. When you look at it from a business perspective, sure, there is one school of thought. This is if we cut the price in half, maybe the subscribers grow, and net I work out okay. You know, I think we do have to be cautious. I mean, we spent a lot of time with these companies over the last 10 or 15 years, and what I will say is that when you look at a company like Comcast, it's not like they're taking all that money and they're locking it away and not spending it. These companies invest large amounts of money in driving the industry forward, and although they have to pay the content rights and they do charge a lot, I think the rest of the world globally has benefited from the innovation and drive, whether it be in technical standards or solutions, that the U.S. pay TV market has driven over the last 10 or 15 years. And I think that there is a bit of a balancing act there.
So John, SyncTV is an over-the-top subscription service. Is that an answer because network service providers are overpriced and under-provisioned?
Are we an answer to solve that problem? Absolutely not. I think that the fact that internet connectivity is overpriced is going to be a problem for anyone who wants to access services over the top. I would say that it's in the network provider's best interest to try to increase speed as fast as possible and provide more service that way, because I think they'll be able to then provide additional services over the top. You know, that'll open up more opportunities for them to sell things on top of this faster service. The longer they wait to roll out faster services, the less opportunity they'll have to sell more things on top of it.
Each of you are working with various codecs, rate shaping, different platforms to be able to enable and drive towards. I mean, what I see is a world that doesn't have standards, and that you're having to work with every single platform, every single device, understand how they are, and try to get content to fit through those little keyholes. And so where do standards go? What are we missing, and how can we get there?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's a really unique time in the industry, in large part because it's not Comcast or the cable companies or the wireless providers. The service providers are not driving the standards anymore. It's being completely driven by the device makers, whether that's Apple, Google, Microsoft, even Adobe to some degree. And so as long as there's this really important strategic market of mobile phones or tablets that Google and Apple and Microsoft are going to fight to the death on, they're not going to be incentivized to go to a common standard for the most part. So I think unless one of those companies says, all right, we don't think video is strategic to our platform anymore, and you may see that coming from potentially a Microsoft in the near future. Until that happens, I think you're going to have the standards war continue to rage. And there's other standards around DRM, like the Ultraviolet Consortium, that's kind of working to create an alternative to the Apple iTunes Store. Again, I think until Apple embraces that kind of additional standard, it's going to be really, really difficult for anything else to get traction, because your content has to work on the iPad. It has to work on the iPhone. So it's going to be really challenging unless the device makers start to call some sort of truce. And personally, given how strategically important these markets are, you know, 20, 30, $40 billion businesses for Google and Apple, it's going to take a long time for standards to converge in the video space.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it will. I mean, and I think, by the way, a lot of people here on this panel benefit from that complexity, because our business in solving that complexity, right? And so my prediction is that, you know, there's always MPEG coming with a new standard and say, oh, great, we have the brand new standard. There's MPEG Dash, is, for example, is making a lot of noise saying it's a great standard everybody can use. Every time there's a new standard, it's just a new standard. So it doesn't solve the problem, because it's adopted, maybe even 80%. You'd always have the long tail of the 20% that are the other protocols.
I like your point. If it wasn't complex, you wouldn't be in business.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I think that you know, we can't forget, if we look at the early 90s when pay TV started, I mean, we take things for granted now, like MPEG and DVB simulcrit for scrambling and pay TV offerings. In the early 90s, none of these things existed, and it was a bit of a mess. I think we're seeing a serious consolidation in many respects in the market today. 3 years ago, if we were all up here, we'd be talking about Windows Media 9. We'd be talking about you know, the VC codecs. What we're seeing now is H.264 is definitely becoming more of a dominant codec. So we can argue about DRM and wrappers, but we're arguing about one less thing for the most part than we would have been arguing about 3 years ago. So I do believe we are making progress. I think in this internet age, we've become much more impatient as how long things should take. But if we look at history as an example, I think we're still moving faster towards consolidation than we did in the 90s in the pay TV world.
Well, I disagree with that. I think, you know, as I agree, H.264 has momentum, but yet now you have H.265 coming around soon. You're going to have Google pushing VP8. You're going to have different initiatives. And so the minute you kind of converge the 80% maybe on consensus that H.264 is the dominant codec. So is the question, is H.264 dominant codec? Yes. However, there's always something new that you also need to support just because a particular device has it or a particular vendor has it. So that just keeps increasing the complexity.
Go ahead.
I think another key is that, it's really our jobs up here to decrease the cost of this complexity to the service providers. And that's why it's great that we have good competition between the companies up here. The constant increasing cost of US cable service is in large part because of this complexity. If we can move the cable providers to a converged IP network where they don't have to spend nearly as much on their network delivery, we can really help there. If we eliminate the need for them to subsidize a $500 set-top box, multiple places in the household, they can save a lot of costs there and reduce costs to consumers in that way. So I think this complexity, while it sounds kind of scary, we make it manageable, we make it easier, we make it more cost-effective, and that's really our job.
So just to repeat the question, to get it on tape, Gary Arlen asked, do you think that convergence is ever going to really happen?
That's a great question. So the convergence of IP being the dominant transport for video, absolutely. It will absolutely happen. And I think what an interesting question up here would be, how soon? Because my answer would be 5 to 10 years.
Well, how soon? How soon, panel? Sam asks.
I agree, maybe more 5 than 10. But I mean, to the question of the convergence is happening at the solutions level. It doesn't, so, again, our job here is provide one solution to fit all the needs of the service providers in order to deliver in that very complex, multi-standard, multi-format environment. And I think that the question is, are Adobe, Google, Apple, Samsung, and all the manufacturers going to sit together and agree on a spec? No. My answer is no.
John?
Well, convergence of what? I think if you went back 10 years and you were able to somehow peek at what we're doing today, you would say, oh, convergence happened. We've got tablets, we've got phones, they all have video, we're done. But we're never done. As soon as we have one thing, we're going to say, well, why isn't this other thing working? And so there's always going to be the drive to converge more things or to have better access to more things in a similar way. So I think this concept of convergence will never die.
I think the question referred to a ubiquitous IP delivery network. And I think, so if you take it to the strictest sense, I'm talking 20, 25 years if you're quite sincere, and I think the service providers would agree. Now, if you look at a network like Comcast, between video acquisition and the RF QAM, it is an IP network today, and companies like Harmonic have enabled that. And so, for most of that network, it is in fact an IP converged network. But the number of RF set-top boxes, in particular MPEG-2 RF set-top boxes, out there in the world today, in cable and or satellite, is far too enormous to see any kind of reduction or vanishing of that volume of devices anytime within 10 or 15 years, unless someone's got a very, very big checkbook. I mean, talk about a stimulus. I don't see it going away, and this is why it's still a critical. This is why companies like Harmonic are still investing in MPEG-2 as a codec for the last 2 years. We see huge market demand for innovation in what many of us consider something long and dead. And I think we have to be very careful about, we as almost pundits in the equipment manufacturer technology space, we're so focused on tomorrow that we forget that much of our customer base is still 15 years behind us or 10 years behind us, and there is definitely a lag between the innovation and the actual full deployment of that solution.
Legacy, right?
Yes. I think it's a really good point, but my thinking is that pay TV has had a luxurious business model for a long time. And they've been able, like you might point to the analog transition, how there's still folks with analog TVs that are just now getting shut off, even though MPEG-2 set-top boxes have been around for a long time. That's really a luxury to be able to support multiple platforms, and they've had the profits and the business model to be able to do so. With the over-the-top entrants like Amazon, Apple, Hulu, Netflix, their business model is going to come under pressure, and they're not going to have the luxury of supporting a legacy, archaic MPEG-2 set-top box for 10 or 15 years. It would be much cheaper to bring them a new, 50-inch LG connected TV device, which is going to cost $300 in 2 years, and switch out their MPEG-2 set-top boxes for that device. So I think it's going to actually happen a lot faster than it's happened in the past.
Well, and resolving those two views is, I think, the way we resolve it is we add legacy MPEG-2 support in our converged product. And so we are not making any prediction as to when it's going to disappear. It's clear that the cable guys want to get out of the MPEG-2 set-top box business, but like my neighbor said, there's still a lot out there. And so the solution at a technology level, at least, to solve that problem is to add legacy MPEG-2 and maybe more innovation in that to deliver to the legacy, still in a new infrastructure. So the infrastructure can move faster than the client receivers. And so that's the way we solved it.
No, I mean, I agree. We talk about video compression here. I mean, it's important to point out Harmonic sells across that infrastructure. We make, you know, tens of millions of dollars selling in the infrastructure, particularly for cable. And I think that you know, you can continue to support that infrastructure really without that burden. You know, whether it be a universal edge QAM that supports IP delivery or RF delivery to the home, the HFC infrastructure out in the neighborhoods, the node splitting, the DOCSIS overlay. These things can all enable the service provider to support that legacy set-top box really without the burden. I think, to Julien's point, from a video processing perspective, the answer is to solve all of those delivery methods, you know, in a device that doesn't compromise on video quality, no matter the codec or format, so the service provider doesn't have to worry about the expense. It's not an added expense or an added operational expense to say, I will support the legacy SD set-top box, MPEG-2, and my iPad infrastructure in a single device that doesn't compromise on any of those delivery methods. And I think that's achievable.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I wouldn't say that it isn't a cost to support the legacy devices in general. I think that there is a cost to do a truck roll on a device that broke because the parts aren't even available anymore or the software is hard to maintain. I think on the encoding side, yes, it doesn't necessarily have to be an additional cost to support that codec, but the overall infrastructure, the overall deployment cost, keeping those legacy devices around is expensive.
Let's invite some of the audience to ask some questions. I bet you have some that are percolating up. So anyone that has it? While we're doing it, let's just talk about green for a second. In this whole world of massive energy consumption, in order to deliver all of this content, what are each of your companies doing to get a little bit more green or offer a greener solution to the provider?
I think that goes back to my comment about picking the right tools. You know, if you look at our, you know, an SDMPEG-2 broadcast encoder in the late 90s was a 200-watt pizza box device. Today, you know, we deliver a 4RU platform that can do 20 HD services in 1 RU and uses, you know, essentially the same amount of power. So picking the right technology, whether it be software, FPGA, ASIC, what have you, is really driving that down. And it is, in fact, a cost. We have customers who have replace their entire video compression head end with a later generation of Harmonic product, and that's paid for itself, independent of feeling good about yourself. From
just with electrical savings?
Electric and cooling savings, yes. So I think beyond the marketing or the environmental impact, there's real commercial benefit to picking the right equipment to give that density without compromising on performance.
Well, the way we see that is by unifying the data center. You know, we no matter how much performance you can get as to a new device, like it was said here, there is a tremendous cost of managing, installing, taking away, powering different devices. So the approach we have taken and that we see the industry taking is standardizing the infrastructure and data center with standard blade servers that keep evolving. And that's a one cost for all the applications, and video just being one of them. And just running those applications as a software layer on top of the standardized data centers. So we see that as a future. And while you can argue that for every blade server you can build a more efficient, power efficient, hardware-based device, it's true. However, by the time you do that, those servers have doubled or quadrupled capacity per watt. And the second thing is 5 new applications that new hardware device doesn't support. And so when you combine all these costs of installing, reinstalling custom hardware, I really think, and it seems like a lot of the tier ones, at least in the US, are taking that trend as having a standardized data center, run everything in software on top of it. So.
Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I completely agree with Julien. The convergence of the hardware and being able to run all your applications on top of the same hardware is absolutely critical. And Elemental, we've kind of taken that one step further. You can use completely standard off-the-shelf hardware, but we leverage off-the-shelf GPUs as well. And GPUs essentially take on the really heavy-duty, computationally intensive algorithms like motion estimation and deinterlacing and scaling. Leverage that on the GPU, the serial processing on the CPU, and you can replace many, many blade-based systems with a single Elemental system by taking advantage of that parallel GPU while maintaining your kind of standardized IT-based infrastructure.
So I have to ask, we're in Silicon Valley, in the land of Facebook and Google and huge Amazon server farms. What are we looking at that's coming out of the valley that might be disruptive or that we are learning from in terms of your own processes and what you're offering?
Well, I have to point out, Elemental's from Oregon. Pretty much all the data centers in the IT space are being built in Oregon right now because we have huge tax breaks and we have very cheap power. So Facebook, Google, Rackspace just announced one, Adobe just announced one. We have 4 or 5 data centers that are being built up in Oregon to take advantage of the
So is
Columbia River
Elemental
Gorge.
actually going to tap in and use some of those server farms that are nearby?
Absolutely. We've announced a partnership with Amazon to build a cloud service on top of Amazon Web Services. And we now have an option in Amazon to select which facility you actually have your software running on. So, of course, we're selecting the Northwest data center for some of the initial beta customers.
Yes.
I mean, you know, moving to the cloud is definitely a trend. It's not for everybody. I think the big service providers will manage their own clouds, but I think for the tier 3 small player market and the enterprise market, that's probably a good solution. So we see that cloud-based video processing will happen mostly for the tier 2, tier 3 space.
So I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would make the comment that I don't think that if there's one thing we've learned, and you use examples in the Silicon Valley, that one solution doesn't always fit, right? Even if you look at Google, for example, they invest in different computing platforms based upon the use case of the application. High CPU, high RAM, low CPU, high RAM, their own Ethernet switches to do their balancing and what have you. And so again, depending on what the customer is trying to achieve in our perspective, sometimes running things on a common IT infrastructure, software transcoding. You know, our Rosette product line was probably one of the early innovators of high-scale software deployments. That makes a lot of sense. When you talk about having to cost-effectively encode, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 streams on a daily basis, like many of our operator customers do, you may need to pick a more hardware-based platform. That doesn't preclude finding savings other ways. We've been pioneering the notion of so-called function collapse. So maybe in a broadcast chain, there are lots of different single devices, whether they be for up-down conversion, cross-conversion, audio encoding, embedding those into a common platform. It doesn't have to be a Wintel platform, but you can save a lot of those energy and complexities without having to say it all has to be on a Dell or HP Blade server in a ubiquitous software environment.
Right.
Tom, I want to point out, I think from my perspective, the most successful technology company in Silicon Valley, and probably the history of the world, is Apple, of course. They have a very singular vision. They've always had singular vision. There is a kind of one solution is the best solution, and that's what we're going to build. And what that does is it lets the entire company focus on what they think is that best solution. And you see the products that come out, they're these fantastic products that essentially define markets. And when you try to build a very wide swath of products, your costs go up very significantly because you have engineering teams managing very different sizes of businesses. And so you have a lot of kind of overhead there for managing different systems. And B, customers are really good at kind of telling you what they think they want, but a lot of the time, as a service provider, as a vendor to service providers, you have to kind of say, hey, the way you've been doing it before, we really think there's a better way. Look at what we've done. At Elemental, it's like, look at GPUs. It took a long time for people to take GPUs seriously as a video processing piece of infrastructure. We kept cranking away at it. We got it better and better and better. And in the last year, we've been able to win Comcast, HBO, ESPN, TF1, many others that we'll be talking about in the near future. And I think it's important for companies to really focus on what they do best and say to customers how they should be looking at architecting their networks in the future.
Sam, what's a GPU?
GPU, sorry, graphics processing unit. They're the chips that go in your PC that make games run really fast. NVIDIA, $4 billion company, is the leading provider of GPUs. Intel and AMD, with their acquisition of ATI, also build GPU products.
Great. Let's go to the audience. Gary Arlen.
This is a question about the complexity you've all referred to and the cloud. And the cable industry has been notoriously inner-looking. They really like to play with each other and play with themselves. Telcos do it, and the telcos typically do it themselves. They had scale to do that over the years. So with that case and all the complexity you've talked about, throughout the value chain and the content providers who are very protective and, from what I've seen, very concerned about the cloud's lack of security, despite what all you're offering to them. How do you see this cloud process working, especially in the multi-screen environment where you're going to be dealing with multiple carriers, multiple delivery systems, and a lot of complexity because there's so many moving parts, and these guys like to do it the way they've been doing it?
I can make a comment on that. Well, there are several areas of security in the infrastructure you need to worry about. One is protecting the content, and there's DRM solutions for that. There are authentication methods. There are a lot of pieces to it. When a cable provider rolls out a box, that box has certain tamper resistance characteristics. Well, all of these consumer products also need to have some tamper resistance on their implementation of how they play back the video as well. There are requirements that the studios have, from end to end on these systems. So I think security is something you have to kind of look, and not just from how you serve up the content, but also how the content's consumed and all the steps in between the content flows through. There are standard ways that is happening. Authentication for TV everywhere is becoming a little bit more standardized across cable providers who are enabling things like HBO Go, or allowing things like HBO Go. And I think that is an example of security becoming something that can be somewhat standardized over an open internet infrastructure. Yeah. But we live in that, speaking from SyncTV, we live in that world all the time, and we have to worry about security problems as we deploy new services for all of our customers all the time, and they have differences. If it's a live service, there's a different way you will handle encrypting the content and propagating the key and making that work in the system. If it's VOD, depending what device it gets to, there may be a different delivery mechanism. We have to worry about that, but the one common thing is you assume that you're on an unfriendly network. And I think that assumption is going to be more and more the case, that it isn't a protected little ecosystem that you're working in, and you can assume that you have big walls around you, and that certain things you can get away with. More and more you have to assume you're on an open, unfriendly network, and all your behavior has to be very authenticated and very protected.
Anyone else?
I think the security is not the issue. I think IT, cloud is using IT, and now more and more, and there's actually more problems with security of those documents and emails that have been already solved. I think the equation between cloud or in-house is going to be really a question of cost and scale. And I think that the big tier ones have probably much less interest. If I'm a small infrastructure, I don't want to build a data center to process video, cloud-based service is great. So I think it will really be determined by the size of the players.
We have major studio companies today running their transcoding farms in the Amazon cloud. So, I mean, it does depends on how they deploy it and how they feel comfortable with the security. But, these are the studios themselves running their transcoding farms with our products in the Amazon cloud environment. So, I mean, there is precedent for it to happen. I think, again, it comes down to legal religion within the given content provider and what they're looking to achieve.
The final thing I'd add is cloud is a very vaporous term, if you want to look at it that way. So there's public cloud, which I completely agree. The tier ones are not going to move all their processing to public cloud because of economic realities in the near term. Then there's private cloud, which I think is going to be a very big push into IT data centers in the large players. And Elemental is really building solutions. Our on-premise Gear Day, of course, works in private clouds. Our Elemental Cloud solution works in the public cloud. And then we're building hybrid solutions between them. So if there's security concerns or there's cloud bursting types of models that our customers want to implement, we want to support wherever they want to do that processing.
So we're almost out of time, and I just have a last question that I want to ask. And Julien, we're in a special part of the world. If you could have dinner tonight with anyone, who would it be?
Probably my wife.
All right. I imagine with your international
She'll
travel.
be glad. I hope it's recorded. That would be. I'll have lunch with any of you guys. Yeah. Come over.
From Tom, from Harmonic, who would you like to have dinner with?
Well, I think in the industry, I'd actually like to have dinner or lunch with Bill Nelson of HBO. I mean, they are truly an outlier from the multi-screen perspective. Although they have HBO Go, and today they announced almost 100 million streams to date, they continue to buck the trend in how they want to allow access to that content. They've pretty firmly said they're staying with the pay TV environment, and even though they've embraced iTunes, it's after the DVD window, and they in fact reported DVD sales uptick at the beginning of this year. And I'd actually like to understand, is it they actually see something we don't, and they're actually being well thought? Are they being overly conservative and scared of losing their subscription revenue, or is it somewhere in the middle? I'd really like to be able to get in the head of Mr. Nelson and understand what the strategy actually is from the inside.
Sure. John, who would you have dinner with?
I'm not sure if a dinner would make or break my business, but I think there's too many people to have dinner with one person. I think to make this market grow and to enable over-the-top services to thrive, there are a lot of businesses that need to exist and present solutions and present more and more services and variability. So
you wouldn't have
I don't
dinner.
think there's one guy or girl that I would meet with and have dinner and say, let's solve this problem. I think there are several companies that are going to provide solutions over time. So my answer is, I think my wife.
And Sam, for the last dinner guest.
It's a really tough call. I think, Tim Cook at Apple, I'd love to kind of get some insight into how he runs that company. Obviously, Elemental is a newly formed entrepreneurial venture. We're only a couple years old. And kind of understanding how he's trying to take what Steve Jobs created there and build on that is a really interesting question. And then Brian Roberts at Comcast. I think Comcast has proven themselves to be a very visionary company. They take technology risks. They've done an incredible job of building out this nationwide infrastructure. I think I'd like to have dinner with those two and see what comes of it.
Okay. So I'd like to give a big round of thanks and applause to our panelists from Envivio, Harmonic, SyncTV, and Elemental. Thank you all so much. Let's have some lunch.